Howdy, guys, gals, and non binary pals. This is the Tales from the Waystone Summer Reading Program.
We are your hosts, Will and Phoenix. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the third installment of our Summer Reading Program series on Travis Baldree's Legends and Lattes, Death and Taxes, where we'll be reading chapters 15 through 19 of the book.
A little explanation before we start. Each week we'll be examining a section of Legends and Lattes and figuring out what we can take from the text to apply to our lives. We will also take time to focus on our phronemus of the week, and then we will share a recommended thing of the week. Finally, we will wrap things up with 7 words from the book and 7 words from our own lives. Before we begin, let's get some disclaimers out of the way. First of all, we are in no way affiliated with Travis Baldree or his publisher, Tor Books. Second of all, our discussions naturally assume that you have read up through the end of chapter 19 of Legends and Lattes. Will has finished this one and its prequel, Bookshops and Bone Dust, but I have not. So we will keep the spoilers to a minimum, and I will tell you what I think is being foreshadowed.
And I will not comment.
Also, a word to our community. Please be kind to yourselves, one another, and the creators of the worlds that we love exploring.
Alrighty, so let's dive into chapter 15. We begin with Viv and Tandri finally getting to enjoy a little bit of respite from the heat with the gnomish auto circulator in full function.
Also, Thimble. Thimble's the one who's actually at the oven. Thimble was probably just sweltering because apparently Viv doesn't think that Thimble has any sweat glands.
Oof, yeah. And one of the things that we see here is Viv kind of looks out and sees her customer base, the people who have chosen to make Legends and Lattes part of their daily lives. And she sees the pleasure that she's bringing them, that the shop is bringing them. And at first she's thinking, this is mine. And then she happens to look over and she sees Tandri also kind of having that same look.
And she amends it to, I guess this is ours.
Yeah, it's really sweet.
So again, I know enough about this to know that there is a sweet little romance that's going to happen. And it seems very much like this is where we start seeing more of it, more of the connection between our two lead characters.
And, I'm going to point this out, romance or not, really what we're seeing here with Viv is she originally was thinking of Tandri as an employee, and she's starting to realize that Tandri is just as integral to this business as she is. Like, we think about it, Tandri is the one who set Thimble's rate. Tandri is the one who's been coming up with menu additions. Tandri has been helping to set pricing. Like, Tandri has driven this just as much as Viv has.
Viv, the idea person. Tandri, the actual, making things logistically work.
Yeah, and neither one of them could have done this on their own. Viv had the drive to get this going, and that doesn't happen on its own. And Viv was also smart in recognizing Cal's skills to help physically realize this.
I'm going to say this. There is a wisdom in delegating.
Exactly. And when Tandri joined the team, Tandri's skills at reading people and understanding people's wants, desires, needs, her empathy, that's what really helped turn this whole thing into a functioning business and a part of the community. Tandri has been able to find ways to express the things that Viv has wanted to say but hasn't had the words for, and has had the know-how to capture what Viv's vision is and help other people see it. And I think that's really powerful.
We have a return of Pendry. This time, Pendry has a regular lute, has more of that folksy repertoire. He's not trying to experiment with interesting and new things. He's maybe not traditional because it still seems like he's writing his own songs, which is great. And I love it. But he isn't, he did a vibe check.
Yeah. Yeah. Turns out going full heavy metal bard wasn't quite what everybody was looking for.
Viv, I think, has treated Pendry in the couple times that we've seen him a little more kindly than she has Hemington.
So if we look at the central thesis of this book, things don't have to be what they start out as. Like Viv can tell by looking at him that he probably wasn't someone who spent his entire life as a musician, that he probably started work as a farmhand or doing manual labor.
Right. I still don't love the distinction that she takes the academic and kind of is a jerk.
I agree with that, but I'll get to that. So, anyway, I think when she looks at Pendry, she sees someone who is not what they started out as, much like herself. He is large and burly. He's got huge, rough, stubby fingers. He does not look like your classical idea of a musician. And yet, here he is playing music of his own creation. He's expressing himself. I think she sees a bit of herself in him.
Pendry is currently singing with a very lovely voice. The price of what I meant to do was higher when the day was through. And when I took a different road, I almost couldn't feel the load.
I kind of feel like this is that sort of thing when you find the thing that you're meant to do and you're doing that, it doesn't feel like work. Like you pay the cost and everything and you don't even think about it because everything just feels so right. So I think if we look at it, he's paid the price to become a musician. That's a cost in time, in money, in all of those things that his family has probably valued, and it's been worth it because he's taken the road that's his and he doesn't feel that extra load. He's carrying stuff, but it feels right. I think when Viv looks at him, she sees sort of a kindred soul.
And much like what you would actually want in a coffee shop, no one really looks up and takes notice. They all just kind of relax into the music. And Viv takes time and thought towards thanking the Scalvert Stone. At first, she was thinking that Pendry was an interesting choice, to say the least, but now she's feeling a lot more sure.
There was something there, even if she didn't necessarily recognize it at first. And I think when we look at a lot of the things and people that show up, a lot of times they represent boons unlooked for. Speaking of, let's talk about Hemington.
Yes. Oh, look. He has now been beaten down so far that he buys all the menu items so that he can have a conversation. I don't like this.
Yeah. Now, there is something that he would like. He recognizes that there are some thaumic weirdnesses in the area, no doubt because of the convergence of ley lines plus the Scalvert Stone. And, he's wondering if he could set a ward for an experiment. And, of course, Viv is a little skeptical of this at first.
Worried. I'd say she's worried because she's still very secretive about the Scalvert Stone. She does not want to draw a target on that specifically. She wants to keep her luck. She wants to keep the things that she's built. She feels like they're precious to her at this point. And they are, and they could be taken away.
It's also worth pointing out that this is the first time he's actually eaten something at the shop because he's just housed a thimblet.
Speaking of housing thimblet phrasing, part of our snack before recording was a little bit of biscotti and some coffee. And it just occurred to me that it is past 5 p.m. It's probably past 6 p.m. And I probably should not have had caffeinated coffee, considering I got 3 hours of sleep last night.
It does explain your rather bouncy mood right now.
Anywho.
Ultimately, Viv agrees, though not without some concern. And we'll get to some of the benefits that will come about as a result of this agreement in later chapters. So, speaking of concerns, Lack shows up with Kellen as well as some more henches.
So, to remind you all, Lack is just the main hench person of the Madrigal that Viv has interacted with, and Kellen is the idiot that's been trying to hit on Tandry and summarily kicked out multiple times.
This also is a section where we see another side of Lack. So Lack is giving his usual veiled threats that are also, hey, you do actually probably want to pay what we're asking. It's in your interest. It's in our interest. We can be partners or we can be enemies. I'd rather we be partners. And then Kellen starts running his mouth, and pretty much in an instant, Lack turns on him and pretty much just tells him to shut the
Fork up.
and the speed and strength with which he turns on Kellen lets Viv know that Lack is not just a pushover and is not someone that she can just guarantee victory over in a martial contest.
It also says that Lack also views Kellen as a bit of a douche waffle.
Yeah.
Does that need to be censored? I don't think that needs to be censored. I'm not going to censor that.
Douche waffle is like douche is a perfectly. It's not one of the 7 words that you can't say.
That's fair. Also, though, maybe douche canoe.
Yeah, maybe.
Because it would ruin waffles. Anyway.
It also kind of lets us know that whatever else he might be, while he may be professionally
an asshole,
Lack does have standards.
Oh, you know what? They answered this question for me. He's an insufferable
shirt weasel. After Lack and his hench people leave, it's Tandri who checks on Viv, despite the fact that she was the one who was probably most vulnerable.
Probably in the most danger. And Viv feels a little like a heel for not checking on her first.
Meanwhile, as Tandri is surveying the living quarters that Viv has set up in the loft, she makes a comment that they're pretty Spartan. And she kind of echoes Cal's assessment earlier. You know, because right now, Viv is basically living out of a sleeping bag.
I have rented a room in houses with other people where I just had an air mattress. I've lived in situations where I only had what could fit in my car. It is not fun and not sustainable.
And Tandri makes that little comment of, you know, you put a lot of care into the shop. That can't be your whole life.
Honestly, I think that Viv needs a different place to live.
Yeah, because when you work from home, you live at work.
Ugh.
And Tandri's point is, you know, you're willing to invest all of this to make our coffee shop. You should invest some of that in yourself as well. Viv responds, well, I can make do with the bedroll. And again, Tandri comes back, much like Cal did. Well, you can, but that doesn't mean you should.
Another theme of this book.
Yeah, it's okay to invest in yourself. And I mean, let's be real here. Sleeping on the ground like that is not good for your back. And as we age, things that didn't bother us in our 20s are a whole nother ballgame as we get older.
Right. Occasionally, I like to sit on the floor and build Lego. My back does not like me sitting on the floor and building Lego. The fact that I broke my tailbone nigh 20 years ago at this point, oh my God, tells me I should not sit on hard surfaces for that long. Does it stop me from trying? No. Should I do it? Also no.
And Tandri basically says, well, at least get a bed.
Right. I have, again, slept on an air mattress as my bed. Bad plan.
And it's worth noting that as soon as you didn't have to sleep on the air mattress, you didn't go back.
Correct. As soon as you can, get a real bed. And as soon as you can, get a bed frame.
Meanwhile, Viv is still thinking about all of the threats that the Madrigal's crew poses. So she gets out the Blinkstone and puts it in the oven to summon the old gang. That brings us to chapter 16.
It was 3 days before the old crew, minus Finis, arrived at the shop. And they proceed to just, your word, house a whole bunch of pastries.
Well, yeah, they're quite houseable. Rune especially seems taken with them.
Yes. And then also they feed a whole bunch of these to the dire cat.
Yeah. So Viv closes as early as she can and sends Thimble home for the day, but Tandri insists on staying. She's part of this. She doesn't have history with these people the way Viv does, but she's invested in what happens to Legends and Lattes.
'Tis true. Also to her friend. The next thing to note, though, there is a little exchange between Tandri and Galena, where Galena takes note of the fact that Tandri is a succubus, and it almost sounds like she's trying to pick on the stereotypes a little bit. And then Tandri is like, excuse me, to which everyone is like, oh, no. Like, Galena understands because she be gnome, but she be, like, the word that they used was, she tends more to wet work, which is blood.
Stabby.
Stabby, stabby.
And Galena takes the rebuke in stride and admits that, yeah, I'm not the way people imagine me stereotypically, so I get it.
Right. But at the same time, those of us who aren't what people think that we should be on first glance should also probably not assume people are something on first glance.
So then let's get to the meat of this conversation. To start with, Viv apologizes for leaving everybody without so much as an explanation or a goodbye. That hurt. Galena was especially pissed because she and Viv were close, but Galena also sees what Viv has built here. Viv and Tandri and Cal specifically have built here. And she understands kind of now what Viv was going for and is happy for her. Of course, Tavis didn't mind because he doesn't like conversations in general.
He is a stone fae. I think it's kind of nice to have a character called out as being quiet and thoughtful.
So he's the same species as Lack, notably. I kind of imagine the Stone Fae because they don't have a direct analog to D&D characters. I imagine them sort of as like rock elves.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good one.
So yeah, he has a different perspective on things. So he's happy to just listen, and his perspective again is very easygoing. So Viv explains the problem she's having with the Madrigal's goons, and Tavis takes note on this as soon as the Madrigal's name comes up. Meanwhile, Galena and Rune are eager to go in and crack some skulls.
Real quick, I don't know the answer to this. Presumably, Will might know the answer to this. Are Lack and Tavis related in some way? Not going to continue on with that thought.
I don't know is the answer.
Oh, okay.
So
The next thing that happens really is a conversation that is about Viv's pride. She refuses to pay the Madrigal because it's a shakedown and all that it is buying protection from the Madrigal. And it goes against everything that Viv stands for, really. Like, this is almost like a personal thing. She knows that if she doesn't care about literally anything else, could just be okay and not feel terribly threatened and choose not to pay and take the consequences, which would probably be a little bit of bodily harm. But she is not willing to put her employees at risk, her friends at risk, Tandri at risk, because of her pride. But she doesn't know how to handle the situation any way other than with brute force.
and she's having a hard time figuring out how to even put this into words.
Right, because her group is like, are you trying to ask us to take care of this for you? To which she's like, no, that's no, that's not what I want, but I don't know how to get what I do want.
Here's where I think Tandri really shines, and this is where we start to see her connection to Viv. Tandri recognizes that if they decide to resolve this by going in and cracking skulls, if they resolve it through violence, it will be giving up what makes Legends and Lattes special and what Viv has built the shop on. Remember that theme, things don't have to be what they start out as. Viv started out her life through violence. She started out her career through basically being a murder hobo. And instead, she has done something different with her life, and she has built something separate and broken that cycle of violence. And if she decides to resolve this, by taking her sword in and cutting through all of the Madrigal's goons, at best, it cheapens what she's built. And at worst, it transforms what she's built into a criminal enterprise in its own right. It's no longer a safe place for people to come and find peace and respite from the cold and a place to unwind from all the worries of the day. And it just becomes Viv's territory and you don't mess with her. It becomes a place of threats. And it's here we really see Tandri not only articulating Viv's vision, but sharing it. I think it's that empathetic side that she has that helps her to truly grasp it and share it and champion it. And when we look at the people that we have in our lives, when you find someone who can recognize your vision for something and then go to bat for it and really fight for it, that's one of the purest joys there is, to find someone like that in your life. And Viv does not feel like she has to say anything more because Tandria has said it perfectly.
So up until this point, Tavis has been kind of quiet. Everyone's trying to ferret out exactly what Viv wants. And Tavis goes, I know the Madrigal. And Viv says, you know him? I know of them. The change of pronouns is obvious. Anyway, she goes and says, so what do you think I should do? And so he offers to set up a meeting. Galena is still stabby, wants to murder stabby. But Viv, I think, is taking the more collected route and the wiser route by following Tavis's advice.
And Tavis makes no promises here. It's worth noting. He says, I can't promise what the outcome is, but I think this is your best chance to resolve this without bloodshed. Because he's listened to what Viv truly wants and what Tandri wants. He knows this isn't exactly safe, but there are no safe courses here. Whatever course of action Viv takes, there will be a risk. This seems like the best chance of achieving the desired outcome without sacrificing the spirit of what Viv is trying to accomplish.
And then, like all cats, Amity shows up and kind of just torpedoes the entire conversation to go, oh, look, kitty.
Yeah, Amity does have a way of puncturing the tension.
And they stuff the cat full of baked goods, which, yay, it's a story, and no, you shouldn't do that.
Maybe dire cats have different digestive tracts than normal cats in our world.
Yeah, Sokka wouldn't do well. Anyway, they talk until past dusk. Viv and Tandri close up shop, and Tandri says that she's sorry for kind of railroading the conversation.
And Viv actually says, no, you actually understand what I'm trying to do here and why it's so important, and maybe sometimes better than I do. I think what Tandri was doing here when she championed Viv's ideals, she reminded Viv of what those ideals were and how much they mean. Like, things don't have to be what they start out as, but it does take work to keep that change moving in the right direction. So I thought, again, just having that grounding that Tandri provides is really how those two work as friends and business partners for now.
You said nothing. Chapter 17. Viv and Tandri were still working companionably at this point. I like that. I think both of them, but we only have Viv's perspective, but I'm pretty sure both of them were kind of worried about how their dynamic might change if Tandri was more vocal. But the scene is set. Viv is able to ignore the sword of Damocles that is the Madrigal above her head. And Pendry comes by. Everything kind of feels nice.
We get our chess-playing gnome.
And we get Tandri going, I am going to figure out what is happening. I think he's playing chess with the cat. Anyway.
The cat seems to like him, so that's usually a good sign. I would say that Amity is a pretty good bellwether of a person's character.
Amity does curl up next to our chess player. And eventually, Tandri is just like, okay, I really don't understand. And she goes and actually asks, so are you waiting for someone? Indicating the chessboard. And the old man is just like, nope. And she gets no answers, which has to be so frustrating. And then Viv, always caring about others more than she cares about herself, talks to Pendry and suggests that he put out a tip jar.
She thinks that his playing is really good and people deserve to be able to pay him for the pleasure that he provides. He deserves to make a living doing what he loves.
We get Cal again stopping by, the kind of back and forth about whether or not he pays for anything.
He says something I think that's really interesting here. So he notices that Tandri brushes Viv's arm as she's leaving to go get some more beans. And he says, everything's going along just fine. Make sure to stop and see it.
I gotta say, there is a tendency to almost look for the bad thing, or to only see the bad thing, and or to get lost in the here, now, current bustle.
I think part of what he's saying is, hey, you've built something pretty awesome here. Take a look at the people in your life and take some time to appreciate them, appreciate what you've built. Allow yourself the time to feel some pleasure at a job well done. Give yourself the space and the grace to enjoy yourself a little bit and enjoy having that space and that accomplishment.
For the most part, I love all the attitudes in this book. I just don't like that they bully Hemington. Anyway, our next little vignette, Galena comes back and Viv takes her out to have lunch at the same place that she took Tandri. Nice little cafe setting, kind of fancy. Galena is still of the opinion, at odds with Tandri's opinion, that Viv should use brute force.
Or at least carry some protection with her.
No, I think she wants Viv to use brute force and provides the protection in the form of knives.
And Viv holds to the principles that she and Tandri have built together and says, no, if I give myself that out, I'm going to be tempted to take it, and in ways that are only going to end in destruction. I think if brute force is on the table, if violence is on the table as a potential out, possibility of taking it is too tempting. It has a way of escalating, even if you don't intend to use it. The presence of a threat invites a threat. And Galena is a little put out, but she understands it. But she does give Viv a warning. Venice is still around somewhere.
Venice has almost certainly told everyone about the Scalvert Stone at this point.
Yeah.
So really the only people that don't know are the people that Viv has surrounded herself with and gathered to herself with, presumably, the help of this magical item. And I think she sees that the same way that I see that, which is that's a little unfair to the people who are really affected, the people who are directly involved with the good fortune she has come across.
So after Viv sends Galena on her way, with a packet of cinnamon rolls no less, Tandri expresses some worries about this meeting with the Madrigal. While she's relieved that Viv isn't taking Galena's knives, she can also sense that Viv's keeping a secret. And, Tandri is someone who, like we've said, she's very intuitive and extremely empathetic. She can tell when people are feeling a given way, when they're hiding something, and she knows that Viv's got something that she's not telling her.
But she's also respectful. She doesn't think that Viv needs to tell her literally everything.
Viv responds with, yeah, I've got something that I'm keeping close to my vest, but I don't feel comfortable revealing it right now. Which I think is honest, right? Like there are things that, we don't necessarily feel like talking about or feel like sharing or don't feel safe sharing. And it's okay to have that. And it's also okay to tell people there is something I don't feel like talking about it. And Tandri respects that.
But at the end of this little section, it's time to clean up. It's time to close up shop. And Viv kind of just blurts out, hey, can I take you home?
Tandri accepts. And, after all of the uncertainty and the threats that they've been facing, having some company on her way home would help her out.
Also, I think that she likes Viv.
I think so too.
So now we get to chapter 18. And this is actually kind of cute. So Lainey has been a character that I'm just like, I don't know about the whole time. There was a part of me that was like, is she the Madrigal? Because that would kind of make sense in that what kind of way. But doesn't seem like that's the case because, as we've read through the next two chapters. But this is kind of endearing. Lainey apparently brings over one of her own plates every day so that Viv will put a cinnamon roll on it and she'll take it home and leave a different plate.
She also wants to swap recipes with Thimble, which I love how she thinks that she's on the same level, especially after that fig cake. She's also really happy to have the coffee shop as a neighbor. For one thing, Viv and Tandri and company are a lot friendlier than the guy who owned the livery ever was.
Yeah, also, I can't imagine that the smell was great. I mean, I used to live across the river from a rendering plant, and that was terrible. Yeah.
But I mean, I would love to wake up to the smell of fresh cinnamon rolls and coffee every morning.
Yeah. Yeah.
She also makes an interesting comment here that all that was needed was a partner.
And since partner can be used for things that are both platonic in nature and romantic in nature, because I mean, you and I call each other partner.
Yeah.
I like the connotation of partner a lot because it puts you on equal footing, because it incentivizes kind of the thought process of you do things together, you work together.
I think it also really just underscores how perfectly Tandri and Viv complement one another. Like they have different strengths, they have different like they're very different people. And it's because they're different that they work so well. Viv had this great idea, but it's Tandri who's helped turn it into an actual thriving business. And Tandri is the one who's able to defend the vision for it when Viv is lost for words.
To get along with the plot, because I know that this episode's already kind of gotten into the weeds. The next thing that we get is a note given to Viv by Tavis, and it simply reads Friday, which is great, at dusk, corner of Branch and Settle, come alone, unarmed, and her meeting with the madrigal was set. That's in the running for the 7 words, but I don't think I'm going to use that. Tandri, of course, is saying she isn't comfortable with Viv going alone. She's not saying, hey, take me, because she knows what her strengths are and that's not one of them. But alone is frightening because she cares about Viv.
And Viv is also smart to recognize that if they're serious about Viv coming alone, they don't want her to break her word, and they will be on the lookout for her to do that.
And so rather than worrying about it, she just accepts that this is what needs to happen in order for the meeting to take place.
There's also something that I'd like to bring up here that I think is pretty important. Viv wants this meeting to go well, and that means that she wants to abide by the agreed upon terms. So that means that she isn't going to give herself the out of violence. She's not going to look for ways to get around any of the preconditions or anything like that. She wants to try and meet the madrigal on the madrigal's terms so that she can maybe get off on a better foot. I think when we're thinking about trying to resolve conflicts peacefully, it does require you to be vulnerable. It requires you to put yourself into a position that may not be comfortable. Viv wants the madrigal to respect her word. So that means she's not going to try and get out of anything on technicalities or look for ways to try and get one up. If there's going to be a peaceful resolution, they both have to be able to believe that the other person is going to do what they say they're going to do.
There's a level of trust here that is required.
Yeah.
We get a little montage of Viv showing up at the agreed upon place, or the dictated place, really, getting a bag shoved over her head, and then guided to a second location. There's descriptions of what Viv can smell and what she can hear. And then the hood is taken off her face, and she's in a very cozy room with a pair of huge stuffed armchairs and a little bricked fireplace with an ornate folding screen. And there's a tea service, and it's just pretty and cute and cozy, and there are bookshelves. It's a little personal library almost, seems. And there is a tall elderly woman in one of the armchairs across from Viv.
It's the madrigal. I notice that the madrigal's hench people are very careful with their pronouns. They use they all the time.
So I'll say this. Generally speaking, they is a safe pronoun to use until you know what the actual pronouns to use are. And then there are some people who will get upset if you use they, them pronouns if their pronouns are something else. In this case, they're using they to obfuscate that it's a woman behind all of this. And the thing about that is that it illustrates some sexism in who is powerful.
Yeah, and you can really tell, like, when someone uses he, him pronouns to refer to the madrigal, it's clear that this is someone who doesn't know who they're talking about, someone who's not in the know.
But we also default to he, him pronouns for unknown, especially powerful people.
Like I say, the people who know who the madrigal is are careful to use a neutral pronoun so as not to tip their hand at who it is. And they don't go out of their way to correct the people who use he, him. But we as an audience know that if someone says he or him to refer to the madrigal, that person has no clue who they're talking about. That person's an idiot.
Or naive or unknown. Like, they could just be one of the people that the madrigal is shaking down who doesn't know. It's not that they're an idiot, it's that they have been kept out of that knowledge.
True. And I guess what I'm saying is, like, if we see someone trying to use the madrigal's name to advance themselves.
Okay, so that is a different thing than what you initially said.
So, yeah, when we see people use the madrigal to get ahead and use the madrigal's title, but then use the wrong pronouns, we know that that person is full of shit. So anyway, I love that the madrigal spends all her time just crocheting doilies like the world's deadliest grandma.
I'm gonna say this, crocheting doilies, I think a lot of people who don't know how to do it view that hobby as kind of like doddering almost. But for those of us who know how to do it, it's not an easy thing, especially if you don't have a pattern that you're going from, because you're trying to keep track of this medium that is organic, but also requires a lot of math and keeping things in your head.
I mean, really, any yarn craft is actually surprisingly mentally taxing.
Depends. There are times when you can just let yourself go, and that's great. But I'm saying that if you're trying to do anything intricate, anything that requires a pattern, and doilies are completely different than a scarf.
This is true. So the madrigal also makes note that she was a little surprised that it was Tavis who reached out to make the introduction, because Tavis was not the first person to put Viv onto her radar. Turns out it was Fennis.
Fennis, who spilled the beans about the assumption that Viv was using a Scalvert Stone to get ahead.
He put two and two together. He's a smart guy. He knows that the stone was the only thing that Viv took from the last job, and he has access to the same libraries that she does.
To the same tales and myths and, like, I don't know, like, why would he have let her go with it, though?
I kind of get the impression that he didn't know that that's what she was going for until that's all she took. And then after that, he did the research. I think he was reverse engineering what her path was. And with that revelation, Viv realizes there's not really much point in trying to deny any of this. So Viv points out that the madrigal could simply take it from her. And the madrigal agrees that she could, but thinks that it probably wouldn't do her any good.
Why not?
I think the madrigal has an idea of what the Scalvert Stone really is, and probably recognizes that Viv's use for it is probably the best use for the greater good. And, the madrigal also kind of understands what it's like to be misunderstood at face value.
I'd say also probably underestimated.
Yeah, like everyone looks at the madrigal and thinks that this is a little old lady who probably is harmless. And I think she gets that Viv also gets viewed as just a brute and recognizes that they're kind of similar in that regard. That who they started out as is not who they have to be.
Once again, that theming. Now, about the fees. Viv, in all her pride, is like, I don't want to pay you. And the madrigal is like, I totally get that. Let's make a different arrangement. They do, and they shake on it, but they don't tell us what that is.
But it's one that Viv readily agrees to.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll get to that in the next chapter here.
Which opens up with Tandri saying a Scalvert Stone? Like, Viv had left Tandri with the instructions of, please come open the shop in the morning. I don't know what the result of this meeting will be or whether or not I will be there. Which, that's got to be terrifying. Like, no matter how close your relationship is, if you're friends with the person or if there's something more there, being told that ominous, this may or may not result in my death.
Nobody likes that.
No. And so, of course, Tandri shows up way early, and Viv is definitely there, and they start having a conversation about the Scalvert Stone. And Tandri is like, is it worth something? And Viv is like, not to most people, but I came across some legends and heard it in the song first, if you can believe it. And then shares the little piece of paper that has the, I guess, song lyrics on it.
And, Tandri doesn't quite get it. And when Viv actually shows her the stone itself, it's not much to look at. But
I get the idea that it's kind of like a goat stone that's like in their stomach to help digest their food.
yeah, that's kind of how I look at it too. It's like a mineral deposit or something that just grows over time.
Yeah, so not something that is ingested, but something like a kidney stone.
Yeah.
And then there's talk about Finnis and how he probably is making trouble so that he can have some advantage over this.
I get the impression that he's trying to play Viv and the Madrigal against each other and then in the wreckage take what he can. He seems like the sort who would work indirectly.
Tandri says the same thing that I guess we're all kind of thinking. Why did the Madrigal leave Viv with the Scalvert Stone? And I like that in this story,
Ash holes.
are called out and that they don't get to win.
Yeah, the Madrigal says, I didn't work with Fennis because he's a massive
Ashhole. I mean, the words that she uses, he is an enormous
duck. Viv makes a useful distinction here between people who are professional
assholes.
People whose job it is to do an unpleasant thing and they have to sometimes be a little rough around the edges, but understand how to hold the boundaries on that. And then people who are just like that.
Yeah.
So lack professional
asshole.
Whereas guys like Kellen are just
assholes.
Which is, I think, partly why Lack was so quick to turn on him.
Kellen's kind of a sexist dweeb.
And Lack, for all of his moral shades of gray, is not a sexist dweeb.
Yeah, maybe. Doesn't seem to be. So we do find out rather quickly at this point what the arrangement really was. So instead of paying money, she's paying in cinnamon rolls, which I have posted my recipe up on our Discord. Totally free to join our Discord, by the way. And we would love to chat with you. And if you really want to see what it takes to make cinnamon rolls, which is, again, a 2-day process, go please check it out. Second, though, she's kind of using Thimble's cinnamon rolls as a proxy for money.
I mean, the Madrigal is not short on money, right? The Madrigal doesn't necessarily need more money. And the fact is that Thimble's cinnamon rolls are a limited quantity thing. And they're also something that not just anybody can make. I mean, guy's a genius. So this is something that Viv can give to the Madrigal that isn't money, but that's probably actually worth more than the money it costs.
Yeah, maybe.
If I put myself in the Madrigal's shoes, I think I'd be willing to accept this as a fair trade, knowing that I get first access to the first buns of the day. That's a good deal.
Fair. This is a book, quote, of high fantasy and low stakes.
Yep.
And now, the next little section, Thimble arrives with a gigantic ice cube. He's making cold storage for them, which I gotta say, the fact that they didn't have cold storage for like cream, butter, well, butter you can leave out, but like cream you can't, like that stuff grows bacteria real quick. Like, that's why butter exists. That's why cheese exists.
I mean, they had sort of a little vault in the ground that just used the natural cooling to try and keep it from getting that warm, but that's limited.
Right. And so now they have ice in the cold pit, and Viv will not let an employee of hers pay for things that should be her responsibility to pay for. I love that, especially when you know about things like teachers who have to pay for supplies for their children. Like, there are so many reasons that the person in charge of the whole operation should be providing these things. And I like the worldview that is being presented here, where Viv takes it as a given that it is her responsibility.
There's also a flip side to this that I think is really cool as well. Viv is someone who does not have to be the one who comes up with all the ideas or directions. Like in this case, Thimble had an idea and decided to go make it happen. And Viv's response is not to try and, take credit for it or squash any of this. It's to celebrate this and say, okay, that's good. How much did this cost you? Here you go. If I'd like you to get more of this, let me know how much it costs and I'll reimburse you. Like she recognizes the good idea and then champions it. That's another really important thing too. I think we've all worked for people who feel like if an idea isn't their idea, it's never going to happen. And so you have to do that thing where if you've got something, you can't just share the idea around or anything like that. You have to try and make them feel like they came up with it.
Yeah.
That's not how Viv plays it though. She's like, "Oh, that's really useful. I didn't know that was a thing we could do. Let's do that." I think that's something that's really powerful as well. It doesn't matter if it's Viv or Tandri or Cal. If someone has an idea, Viv is happy to implement it. And she's also happy to let them experiment to try and figure things out. I think that's really cool. And this little ice block also gives Viv an idea.
Iced coffee.
I mean, after all, poor Hemington, right?
He doesn't like hot drinks. He doesn't like bread. He doesn't like a lot of things. He strikes me as someone with some autistic traits around his food intake or some neurodivergent traits. A lot of us have strong disgust reactions to things, especially textures, especially food textures. And again, I do not like the portrayal of Viv being like mean to him over them. But in this case, it's like, hi, I got you something. She's not incredibly unkind. I just think that teasing people over these very real reactions is not caring for them in the way that I find cozy.
Well, and this is why when she hands him this iced coffee, he's initially a little resistant. Hey, I don't drink hot things. And she goes, I know. This is why it's cold. Try this.
Have a bribe. Will you help me make a ward against a specific person, please? Thank you. That's kind of what this conversation winds up being.
Well, and it ends up also being something where they find they have a mutual interest. He finds that there's a beverage that he actually can enjoy here. So now he doesn't have to feel like, taking up space that should go for paying customers.
He doesn't have to feel guilty.
Right. And he also can have something he actually likes.
I do like that they thought of him. I just wish that it didn't come at the cost of also having been kind of rude to him.
Agreed. I like to think this is a case of growth. They're growing in how they learn to see him and learn to meet him where he's at. And, I think it's also worth pointing out that in addition to just something for Hemington, this also represents something that will be really useful once the summer heats up. Because I don't know about you, but when it's 90 plus degrees out, the last thing I want is a cup of hot coffee.
It's true. However, I have been one of these people. Not always, not often, but when I was younger, the opposite was not true. I did get iced coffee in the winter.
I've done that sometimes. There is a period, usually hits around January, where it gets really cold, and then the only thing I want is ice cream. It's weird. I don't get it, but yeah. So, yeah, he's happy to set up a ward for a specific person. Obviously, it's Fennis. And he gets the details from her. So while Viv's telling Tandri about this idea for ice drinks, Kellen returns to be a creep.
Kellen, clearly an incel.
He's trying to big time everybody about how he knows the madrigal and everything, and Viv isn't having it. She's met the madrigal. And they've come to an understanding. And while people who maybe get their hands dirty are necessary, they don't have to
be assholes.
The madrigal hates
assholes.
Be a shame if she discovered one of her hench people was
an asshole.
And Kellen tucks tail and runs. And as he's running off, Viv can't help but notice that this brings a little bit of a smile to Tandri.
Again, pretty sure there's multiple reasons why Tandri does not like this guy. Period. End of sentence.
Yes.
And now they have a new menu item on the chalkboard. I do like the updates. Like, this is kind of satisfying because it shows growth.
what it feels like is it's that little feeling you get when you're playing a game and you get the achievement unlocked thing, you know?
Yes.
It's, oh, this is a new achievement that you've added. Ooh, you've got a new skill. Ooh.
Ooh, you have a new thing on the board. It is any drink iced, a refined twist.
You know what it feels like? It's like when you level up and you get a new skill in your talent tree. It's
Yes.
like that.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. New item unlocked. Or like when you get a magic item, or when you get just that extra skill, or when you get that extra thing to play around with.
Yeah, you get a new ability or a new spell or a new, just something extra, a new class feature. Yeah, it has that same feeling to it. So as they're closing up for the night, Viv finds herself worried about Fennis and remembers an old proverb that we'll close on. The poisoned cup foretells the poisoned blade.
Is that a warning about who to trust? Is that a warning about there's going to be an attempt to harm someone? Or, as I have been saying since I keep seeing the conflagration stuff burn down the Legends and Lattes cafe?
I think it is a warning that while the threat of the madrigal may have been neutralized, Fennis is still out there. And we know that he will use indirect means if he has to, but he may also use direct means. And if he can't use the madrigal, he may be doing it in other ways.
The danger's not over.
Nope.
We also are just past the halfway point of our 7 episodes of, the plot. There's plenty of book left. There's plenty of action left to discover. We have 3 more episodes. And because I like to plan, and because I like to invite people to help, and because I like to kind of get a sense of what our audience wants and or likes, I think this is a perfect time for us maybe to discuss what happens in our next little mini-series of our summer reading program. We were thinking about it. There are 3 books that are on our list. One that Will has read, one that I have read, and one that we both have read. And we're wondering if anyone has any strong opinions and or not so strong opinions, or just kind of curiosities, and would like us to cover one of them specifically for our next edition of the summer reading program. Those books, the one that I have read is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune.
The one that I've read is the follow-up to Legends and Lattes, Bookshops and Bone Dust,
which is actually the prequel to Legends and Lattes. So if you would like us to continue talking about Viv, please let us know. That's also on the table. And then the one that we've both read
is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet
by Becky Chambers,
which is sort of a cozy science fiction. That's the best way to describe it.
I don't think it's as cozy, but I do think it's really good.
It's kind of a road trip movie.
Or book.
A road trip book.
So those are the 3 we're narrowing down. We'd like to have any input that you want to provide. I'll probably put something up on the Patreon to ask who wants to have input, which of these 3 sounds the best. But also just come over to the Discord and tell us. That's the best way to actually talk to us, because we actually do read that.
We'll put a poll up for you.
We will try to remember to put a poll up for you. We'll give you probably... We'll leave that up for a month if we can. We'll leave that up for the longest amount that makes sense. How's that?
Yeah.
I don't want it to just disappear so that those of you who have heard this much later, but still within the time frame where we can choose our next book, don't get an option to tell us what you'd like. But, come by for memes and cinnamon roll recipes and decisions on what we should read next.
Yeah.
And with that, it's time to talk about our Phronimos.
It's your turn. Who'd you pick?
So I was kind of tied between Tandri, who has probably been the most consistent Phronimos character, really, of the book. She seems like she is the voice of reason. But I think that maybe we pick the one that was from Viv's previous adventures, Tavis. Tavis, who urges everyone to maybe de-escalate, to not immediately jump into let's go kill it, which is what a lot of D&D groups come down to, is let's go kill it.
That's why D&D players are oftentimes known as murder hobos.
Exactly, which you have talked about Viv being a murder hobo a lot, and I love it. The thing that I like a lot to do in campaigns where I am playing, to do when I am a DM. I like the options to either circumvent, to diplomacy your way out of things, to not just murder pwn everything. I also like the tactic of, well, this one's challenge rating is about 1,000,000 times too big for y'all. Do you want to go unalive yourselves? Let's give you all the hints that say you are not going to survive an encounter with that if what you are trying to do is like raffle pwn it.
I like that he counsels caution
Yes.
and also really listens to what Viv is actually trying to accomplish. He is realistic about setting expectations. Like, he doesn't say, oh, yeah, this will totally fix all your problems. He says, this might be something that can help. I could arrange a meeting. He also holds to his word. Like, he knows that he cannot reveal who the Madrigal is or how he knows her. So he doesn't. He just says, I do know them. I am bound by certain oaths that prevent me from saying more.
I do like the discretion, but I think really the reason that I did choose this, the reason that I find him as a compelling option for our Phronimos this week, is because he counsels going at it from a different direction. He counsels making more measured choices.
I think he also counsels working in good faith. So not just going to have a meeting with the Madrigal in an effort to get close so that you can then stab her in the back, but rather getting close to the Madrigal so that you can listen and come to an understanding with her in good faith and come out of this with an arrangement that you both can live with. I think that's the key there. And, he recognizes that not every problem has to be solved with brute force
or violence of any kind. Sometimes you can avoid the encounter. Sometimes you can make the encounter be something completely different than you expected. Sometimes you can adopt an NPC.
Right. We've all had that adopt an NPC experience.
If you don't kill them all, you might make friends.
If you kill all but one of them, you can Stockholm Syndrome that remaining one to become your loyal lapdog.
Not what I meant. Oh, well. But that does happen a lot. Anyhoozle, I think it's time to move on to a recommended thing.
Yep, it's my turn. And so you guys know that both Phoenix and I are big fans of the rock band Ghost. And they got a new song out with an album coming out on April 25th.
Woohoo!
So yeah, that's always good fun. So the new single that's out right now is called Satanized. And, it took me a little bit to get into the first time I heard it.
Yeah.
But the more I've listened to it, the more it's grown on me.
Yeah.
It feels like it's got some touches of Queen to it, feels like. Of course, we've got a new Papa cycle. In this case, it's Papa the Fifth Perpetua. So that'll be fun.
We get a glimpse at the end of this music video. Also, for a song called Satanized, it is very, very, very pop.
Yeah. I mean, if we look at what Ghost's trajectory has been, it's basically ABBA with downtuned guitars.
Yes. This is very ABBA with downtuned guitars. I do tend to enjoy the darker ones also a lot, but the ones that are just kind of camp are also very fun.
I mean, and this one does have, like I say, sort of the Queen touches with falsetto vocals that pop in, and you have, the music video itself it feels like something out of Ingmar Bergman almost.
I also do love that all of the ghouls and ghoulettes get to be in the video without all of their obfuscating costuming.
No masks.
No masks. They actually get to show their faces.
They just all have bad wigs.
Or habits.
So yeah, some good fun there for you. Again, I'm curious to see how the new album's going to turn out. We'll give it a listen once that comes out.
I'm also curious as to if the look that we think might be the new ghoul look is the new ghoul look, because I do like it, but I want to see if that's going to be what they have for their stage performances.
We'll find out.
Yes. Although it will all have to be from official photos now, because They have done a thing that I need to actually be very happy about this and like vocally happy about this for like reasons. As much as I like being able to watch concerts on YouTube, if you get the right one, where it isn't just a sea of phones in front of the person who is recording, and they don't have terrible audio, and they don't have terrible video, and they don't have all of the stuff that isn't like, I mean, they're not professionals, they're concert goers, but you're not living in the moment of the concert, and you're almost always not going to just rewatch the concert and then go, oh yeah, that was like connected to the fun part, because it's not the same. Tobias being the frontman of Ghost, did an interview and said specifically it has nothing to do with copyright, it has nothing to do with any of the stuff. Like, what it really is that I want people to live in the moment of the concert and enjoy the concert. And I love that because I've stopped using my camera as a lens to like kind of separate myself from events while trying to pretend that I am documenting or enjoying or living in those events, but living in them in a way that gives me a future view of those events. Because there is a complete different experience when all you are seeing is a sea of phones versus a concert that is like you actually getting to take in the stage presence and the theatrical experience. And so I love that the Ghost concerts going forward are requiring that you put your phones away.
Yeah, they give you a little pouch that you keep with you, so you can't just reach in and grab it. And it's locked while you're within the confines of the arena. You can always step out into the concourses if you need to take a call or respond to an emergency or something like that.
But then you're also not disturbing everybody else around you.
Yeah. He calls back to the experience of going to concerts in the 90s when he was a kid.
So he's our age.
He's our age. And he talks about how when he was at those shows, everybody there was 100% in the moment. They were there with the band. They were there experiencing everything. They were cheering. They were singing along. They were, moshing or dancing. Everything was happening in community. And the modern concert experience where everybody has their phones out and they're trying to live stream it or whatever, nobody is actually present.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at. Also, it's got to be a bummer for the band just to see a sea of phones.
Yeah, it really is. It's not fun. So when they did the live show that they had professionally recorded for the Right Here, Right Now film,
they required all their phones be put away.
And the actual experience for the band was a lot better.
And also, a lot of the concert goers said the actual experience of the concert was a lot better.
Yeah, it turns out that it makes it so that you're getting a better product for the people who actually go to the show. And I mean, concerts are expensive enough as it is. You should at least have the best possible experience when you go.
I think that we've exhausted that topic, and so we need to move on. So it's time for our 7 words. I have the book this time. I have a few options. I'm going to read a couple of them off. Because this shop is mine, she thought. Although she later amends that to, I guess the shop is ours. Talking about Pendry, last time wasn't bad exactly, just surprising. And then there's the look at your hero as a person rather than as a figurehead, and the sentence of, Viv tried her best to project confidence. I think we've all been there where we definitely feel like we're not at our best. We're not at the level that is necessary for this experience.
Or we're outside of our comfort zone.
And then the one that I did choose, because it's cute and it's adorable and I love it. Hey, so you want to walk home?
Yeah, that's pretty cute.
All right, so those moments with your crush where you're just not sure how they feel back. Probably because they're masking their own feelings back. Or maybe, sometimes there's the case where they're not really that interested and they just want to be your friend, which whole other rant. The friendship is not a consolation. It is friendship, and it is wonderful, and I love friendship. I am a friendship shipper, and I don't want a lack of romance to be a rejection of a friendship. End of rant. But when you're kind of like, oh, I like you, Can I walk you home? Can I keep being in your presence for a little while longer? I like being around you. I don't want to go away. I've had that with friends too, though, where I'm like, I don't want to leave. I don't want to stop having a conversation with you. I don't want to stop this. I don't want to do any of the other things that I have to do that are on my list of things that are responsibilities. I would rather spend all my time with you.
Well, and I think there's also, even beyond all of that, when that moment happens, Viv recognizes that Tandri doesn't necessarily feel safe, and she doesn't want her friend to experience that, doesn't want her friend to feel alone, and knows that she can be a solid presence to maybe help her friend feel safer. So I think there is, that sort of selfish, I want to spend more time with this person. But I also think there is that element of legitimately wanting to help that friend to feel safe, which I think is part of what makes it all work. And it's okay to have all of those motives together. It's okay to want to spend more time with a person. It's okay to be a little, quote, selfish about that. It's also okay to think about how your presence might help that other person feel better. And I think that's what makes all of this cute.
Yes.
So I have 7 words from life. I have a very meta one, and I think you're going to hate it.
Oh no, you think I'm gonna hate it?
I think you're going to hate it. My 7 words are, I couldn't find 7 words from life.
Okay, only reason I hate it is because you've used this before.
Told you.
You have absolutely done this before. That is such a freaking cop-out.
I told you you'd hate it.
You're absolutely right. I hate it.
Well, good thing you love me, because you're stuck with me.
Oh, darn.
Well, with that, I'd like to thank you for potting with me.
Thank you for potting with me.
And thanks for listening to Tales from the Waystone.
Summer reading program.
Join us next time as we continue the summer reading program with chapters 20 through 24 of Legends and Lattes.
We would like to thank our friend Shani Jang for our theme music.
And many thanks to Travis Baldree for creating this world we've enjoyed exploring.
Audio production and editing courtesy of me, Phoenix McCullough.
And writing and project management courtesy of me, Will McCullough.
If you would like to help support us and have the means to do so, please join us on our Patreon page, patreon.com/waystonepod. Our next Equinox pod will be on the graphic novel I Hate Fairyland, the third one, which is Good Girl. It's twisted and messed up. That's definitely in my wheelhouse. And I believe there's still, I don't know how Patreon's doing it right now because they've kind of changed a few different things. I think that there's still a free trial so that you can go and listen to all of our Equinox pods and everything, Equinox and Solstice. Go ahead, check us out over on Patreon. But seriously, everyone, join us over on Discord. If you are on Discord, just join our server. We don't talk too much over there so that it's not like desperately annoying, but it's a great place for you to share things that you've created. It's a great place to talk about recipes. Like if you have a shorter recipe for doing cinnamon rolls and they still wind up like absolutely just amazing and you love them, that would be great. If you want to read my one that takes 2 whole days to make, also wonderful and great. If you want to show us something that you've built or something that you have written or, any number of things that just make you happy, come over and share. And if you would like to have some input on what we read next, also come talk to us.
Well, as always, here's to one more day above the roses.
To one more day above the roses.
Ding!
Ding. Ow!
Sorry. I'm really sorry.
Sneeze away from the microphone next time.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't want to interrupt you there, so I couldn't speak, so.
No,
really
I got
sorry.
you. Just sneeze away from the microphone next time.
Okay. I'm really sorry about that.
Uh-huh.